Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our panel today, Female Founders, The Secret to Democratic Success. My name is Alyssa Batchelor-Causey. I'm the CEO and founder of Hill and State Strategies, a national Democratic opposition research firm that is also building the first ever AI-powered opposition research and strategy platform, RivalMind AI. Today, we have a fantastic panel of women across the political ecosystem who are consultants, strategists, technologists, and nonprofit leaders. I cannot wait for those of you who are either watching live or on the playback to hear from these amazing women and all that they've accomplished. So without further ado, I'll start by introducing some of our panelists today. So our first panelist is Nancy. Nancy is a pollster and the founder of Z2A Research, the first ever 100% millennial women-owned polling firm. Nancy is an American Association of Political Consultants 40 under 40 honoree, and her polling for CNBC was the most accurate public polling in the battleground states in 2020. Prior to launching her practice, Nancy ran the polling teams at Change Research and the DCCC. Hello, Nancy. Welcome. Thank you so much for being on the panel today.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Great. Our next panelist is Kelly Grace Gibson. She's a veteran political media consultant that has worked across the democratic communications ecosystem for nearly 20 years. She's worked on races from president to school board with a special expertise with female candidates in red states and ballot measures. In 2021, she launched Stronger Than Communications, a women-owned, women-led media collective. Kelly sits on the American Association of Political Consultants board. She's a longtime member of the faculty at the campaign school at Yale, and she's an influencer with Running Start. Hi, Kelly. Nice to meet you.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Our third panelist is Kristal Knight. She is an experienced political strategist who has worked on campaigns at the local, state, and national levels and has consulted with national organizations such as Demos, the NAACP, and Faith in Action. She's also the founder and board chair of Organize Tennessee, a voting rights nonprofit that seeks to ensure every Tennessean has access to the ballot. During the 2020 cycle, she was the political director for Priorities USA and is an Obama 2012 and Hillary 2016 alum, and is a graduate of Howard University and the University College of London. Hi, Kristal. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Welcome.
And then our last panelist today is Alex Niemczewski. She is the founder of and CEO of Ballot Ready, a platform that mobilizes voters and constituents to take civic action, powered by the most comprehensive database for local politics. She started it in 2015, and Ballot Ready has worked for hundreds of nonprofits, advocacy groups, campaigns, and brands like Snapchat, Spotify, NPR, and the Miami Heat to reach over 35 million users and make democracy work the way that it should. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. Hi, Alex. Thank you for being on the panel.
Thank you for having me. Very nice to be with you all.
Great. So what we're going to do and how the panel is going to go is we have questions for each of you in 3 different sections, those being on business, on kind of 2024 election stuff, and the future for questions about future leaders moving into their own opening up their own shop or moving forward in their career. So I'll go ahead and jump in and get started. So each of you are extremely accomplished and well-respected strategists and founders within the political ecosystem. Walk us through your career journey thus far and share what prompted you to go out on your own and open up your own shop. So Kelly, I'll start with you.
Sure. So my corner of this work is political media and communications, but the product is mostly paid media. My first election cycle was the 4 cycle, so I'm coming up on my 20th year in paid media. And at the time, obviously, there wasn't any digital advertising, but since that's sort of come on the scene, the shop that I founded is a cross-channel media operation, mostly because I just think that's the smartest way to run voter contact programs.
Yeah.
I got a job right out of college working for Planned Parenthood in Pennsylvania and thought I'd move to DC that year and get a job at the motherland of Planned Parenthood. And it turns out you can't just get the job you want right when you want it. So I answered an ad to answer phones at a political media shop. I didn't even know what political media consultants did. So I came at it a really different way than other media practitioners in the space.
Yeah.
So I stayed there through 2006, and then I went to another one from 8 till whenever. And then I finally became a partner at a different shop about 10 years ago, probably halfway into the work, not an equity partner. And then I worked by equity in a firm. Mm-hmm. And what I learned along the way is that political media is very formulaic, certainly on the Democratic side. And there is a particular path to do it. There's a particular kind of person that does it. And I didn't fit either of those boxes. And so I, over the years, had sort of gotten to a place where just by natural filtration, I almost worked exclusively with and for women. I found women actually quite a bit easier to work with and for than men, at least in my corner of the work, and thought, if this is what's happening naturally, I might as well try to make a go at formalizing what is happening naturally. So after the 20 cycle, I guess bought out of my equity in my last firm and launched Stronger Than Comms, which from a business perspective is built as a collective business model. So instead of the top down, a couple partners and some junior level staff and so on and so forth, because I do political media and I'm paid with commission on any buys, I'm able to build teams and share points, broadcast points, that's how it's paid, with a bespoke group of women, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, whose expertise and network are complementary to mine. Wow. I often find political media firms have one senior person that lands the work, and then they have junior people that execute on the work. I didn't think that made a lot of sense. I also sort of deeply believe that if there's not enough seats at the table, you should probably pull some more up or build a bigger table, and you should occupy those seats with women, people of color, with geographic diversity, with age diversity. So that's what Stronger Than Comms is all built on. So the reason I went off on my own is I didn't see anything out there that suited what I think could meet the needs of the moment in political media.
Thank you so much. And turning it over to you, Nancy, did you kind of have a similar experience in that you just didn't think that there was anything out there? And walk us through your career journey and how, you ended up opening Z-Day Research.
Sure. I also just want to admire Kelly for seeing and envisioning something different and going in and creating it, because it takes a lot of courage to do. I also just accidentally found I knew I wanted to do something in the political space, and I accidentally found myself at GQR, a polling firm, and I just knew that there was other smart people, and that I thought it was interesting, and I thought I'd give it a shot, and it turned out to be just a perfect fit for my personality to be able to do strategy and shape messaging and provide answers with data. So I ended up running Stan Greenberg, the CEO's team, and then ultimately also took on running Democracy Corps, which is the 501c4 that does progressive messaging that him and Carville founded many, many years ago. And so I had experience managing teams, doing pricing, all the things that might be harder for some other folks to get their head around if they've always been focused on just the polling, for example, but the admin, the bookkeeping, things like that. So I had exposure to that. Went on to go to the D trip and was the polling modeling director, and then didn't want to go back to a traditional polling firm. I wanted to have a different kind of work environment, different culture, and to try to fix some of the issues that I was seeing in the polling industry in terms of affordability and access to polling, instead of just doubling down on what was increasingly becoming expensive and unapproachable and less accurate. And I was there for many years and helped build up this polling team. It was a startup, so it was a lot of opportunities, and built out a qualitative practice, built up a political polling practice, taught a lot of people how to become pollsters, really had a chance to have ownership and build out new methodologies for reaching people online. And that was great, because that means I'm now capable of running things from start to finish without a lot of the overhead that a lot of other traditional polling firms have. And ultimately, I think I ran up to a point where I developed my own ideas about how to run the business, what my value add was, how I should spend my time. And I didn't necessarily know that I was going to be starting my own business. I just knew that I wanted a different chapter. And if you had asked me about like 4 months into it, I had a website, I was servicing clients. And if you'd asked me if I ran my own business, I would probably say no. Like, it just hadn't occurred to me yet, but I knew that I wanted to do something else. And I knew that I needed to service clients in the meantime. So I just sort of started doing it. and found myself here, and it's been such a blessing, and found so many other people that were able to encourage me along the way. And so that started right after the 2022 election, and we're still going.
Great. Thank you so much, Nancy. I want to turn it over to you, Alex. How has that differed from your experience, starting Ballot Ready as like a nonprofit, civic tech product, and walk us through your journey and how you decided to jump into the world of political tech 2 feet.
Well, it was definitely 2 feet. So before starting Ballot Ready, I worked at nonprofits helping people find jobs. I taught English as a second language. I taught the GED. So really direct service work. Mm-hmm. And then I did human-centered design consulting, which kind of helped on the tech side. But it started when I was getting ready to vote in Chicago, and my ballot in 2014 was 92 races long. Like, wow. So all these judges, water reclamation commissioners, which I had never heard of before, despite living there for a while. And there were all these candidate names I had never seen before. Mm-hmm. So I made a website for myself just to keep track of all the candidates running. And everyone I talked to was like, oh yeah, I don't know who to vote for all the local stuff. And this included, I met the mayor of Chicago, and he was like, yeah, I don't know who to vote for all the judges. Even though he's probably like behind the scenes supporting that. Like, it's just like a lot of information to keep track of, even for the most informed people. So I reconnected with my co-founder. My co-founder and I had gone to college together. We started working on it. We knew this would be useful for voters. Mm-hmm. What we came to very soon realize is the data on what will be on the ballot when local elections are, there was no single API out there. Right. We assumed there was, and now there is, because we build it and maintain it, but it was a huge research problem. And that research is really useful to nonprofits, advocacy groups, unions, organizations that are doing electoral work. Like, it's really helpful to know, here are all the candidates running, here when all the local elections are. So we realized that was a valuable problem to solve on the business side of things. Yeah. And that was back in 2015 when we officially started. We since 2017 have covered the whole country and all the local elections in the country. Wow. With information on how to vote, registering, how to sign up to vote by mail, and what will be on the ballot, so people can actually be informed. And we hear a lot from people, this is the first time I've completed my ballot, or this is the first time I've completed my ballot without guessing. So we are still
very important.
We are still solving that original problem that I had back in the day.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Alex. And I want to ask Kristal now, because you've been on both sides. You've been on the campaign side. You're now, founder of Organized Tennessee. How did you decide to start Organized Tennessee? How has your political career evolved, and how have they interacted with each other?
Yeah, I think much like what the other panelists have already stated, I saw a gap and decided that I wanted to fill that gap. Mm-hmm. But I think what led me to that, I worked in national politics, local politics, and in 2017, I moved back home to Tennessee to lead up Emerge Tennessee. I was the founding executive director for the affiliate in our state. Mm-hmm. And after recruiting and training women to run for office, I realized that there was not an ongoing voter protection effort. Mm-hmm. Coupled with that, I'd worked our 2018 U.S. Senate race, and realized throughout that Senate race that, again, we're having to stand up voter protection, voter election houses, or, temporary devices to make sure that people weren't being turned away, right. To make sure that there were enough poll workers, to make sure that there were enough lawyers who could interrupt processes where people were being turned away, or people who just didn't understand how do you work with an election commission. And so after the 2018 U.S. Senate race in the state, I decided that we needed a permanent clearinghouse for voter protection. We needed an entity that would work with election commissions. We needed an entity that could pool enough volunteer lawyers from across the state who would be willing to fight for democracy in our state, and that we needed an entity that would actively recruit and train younger poll workers across the state to be in precincts on election day throughout the full day. What was happening and what continues to happen, not only in our state, but across the country, is most of our poll workers are senior citizens. Many of them are people who don't have anything else to do. They're volunteering. Maybe they're being paid by the election commission, but they're not always up to standards on what the rules are. And so a lot of things are slipping through the cracks, and people are frankly just being turned away and not being able to exercise their right to vote. And so what Organized Tennessee does, we recruit all of these people, we train enough lawyers so that the most egregious parts of our state, the counties that experience the most problems, those have coverage. Until we can build up a large enough apparatus where our entire state is covered, we continue to grow through each election cycle. And so my desire really to create this was really birthed out of the U.S. Senate race, where people were being turned away. And even in the most recent election in our state, in our two largest counties, which is Davidson County in Nashville and Shelby County, which is in Memphis, voters were voting at the wrong precincts because the lines have been redrawn, and poll workers were not aware that people needed to, that their addresses or that the places that they've been voting really weren't the places for this current election. And so we saw many news reports, many voters saying, I voted, but I voted in the wrong district. I voted for the wrong person or for the wrong candidate. And so that's why our organization is so important to the state, because we want to interrupt those kinds of incidents and then report them up to our national partners like the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, who helps us interrupt some of the challenging things that happen at the ballot box.
Right. Actually, Kristal, I'm going to stick with you for this next question. So after making your initial decision to, open and start your own organization, what were the first steps that you took in putting the word out there, in attracting and building this infrastructure? And how has that changed over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think, the first thing I did was register the company, right?
Yeah.
And you have to go through that process. And I think anyone on here who has founded a C3 organization knows that you can get an EIN immediately, but you can't get your C3 tax status with the IRS immediately. So understanding that took a couple of months, like that's a process. But going around, thankfully, I had been in a position because of the work that I had done with Emerge, that I had already traveled the state of Tennessee. So I had folks in all corners of the state that I could reach out to. But it took a lot of early conversations, going back and having conversations with people, sharing with them what my idea was and why I thought that they should invest into it. Meeting with some of the established political folks in the state to sell them on the idea and to ask, is there any other entity that exists that is doing this work? So those were some of the earliest conversations that I held. I think the other thing was fundraising, raising money, asking people to seed this organization because it's brand new. No one knows what it's going to do. But thankfully, again, I'd been raising money in the state. I had a good enough network and name recognition that people would invest because I was attached to it. So I think leaning on your own experience, leaning on your own ability to garner attention and to garner support, that was an early win. I think the third thing that I was able to do was to get press, to get some small, local or state-based press. And then when we hired our first executive director, because I have not actually run the organization, I've always wanted to just be the founder and have people to work for the organization, making sure we had the right people, right? The right people who could go across the state and sell this mission, and really explain to people why it's important to have an entity like this. And so those were the things that obviously they're growing pains whenever you're starting something new. And, fundraising was very slow in the beginning, but we've been able to consistently grow and pay poll workers, and expand the number of counties where we have a presence year by year. And so that's one of the ways that we've been able to measure success, is how many people are we able to train and get them to actually volunteer and show up at a poll? And then how many counties can we cover? Because Tennessee is a big state and we have 2 time zones in our state. So those are other barriers and challenges that we were actively fighting against when we were beginning this organization.
Thank you so much. Alex, was that kind of similar to your experience in founding Ballot Ready as a C3 organization as well? And, walk us through kind of how you got your legs using Ballot Ready, and then how you also, kind of acquired some customers for your platform.
Yeah, we're actually not a C3. We are a for-profit company. So we did that because we kind of found some customers first. And for us, it's really nice to have our customers being our only buyer. If our tools aren't working, we get direct feedback from our customers. And if they are working, we also get direct feedback because they buy more. And my co-founder and I specifically wanted to do that versus going to donors, because there is a market, there is a big political market, and we didn't want to split our time between talking to our customers about our tools and separately talking to donors. Obviously, donors are great, and there are definite times when it's great, very necessary to talk to them. But we also raised money from investors early on. So for us, the first thing we had to do was, we had this anecdotal evidence that our tools were useful for voters. Just people said they were, but what we needed to prove is that they would come to, if we made a site, they would come to the site. So we did that. That helped us raise from investors. A lot of our investors are actually, most by far of our investors are angel investors who are individuals. They're like donors in a way, but they obviously it's a different interaction. And we, as part of that process, was proving voters found our tools useful, proving out how we do the research, basically iterating on different ways of finding all that data. We tried a volunteer model in the beginning. We switched from that because the quality was so low that it ended up being more expensive. So we now all our research, we pay our researchers. And what else? We just iterating on our tools. We started with just a voter guide that was here's who is on your ballot. And then we added, here's how to make a plan to vote, find your polling place, find your drop box locations. A big thing for us was in 2020, since so many people were voting by mail, we added a tool quite quickly to help people sign up to vote by mail. And that turned out to be very useful, but also hectic on internally. But we obviously, that's still useful. And learning how to best communicate what our tools do to our customers has been a journey as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Alex. And for Kelly and Nancy, a little bit of a different kind of a little bit of a different, way that you've gone about acquiring customers and clients. So I'll start with Kelly. What was that experience like when you first started Stronger Than Comms?
Well, half the job of being a political consultant is trying to get work to be an actual political consultant. So the hustle is like sort of baked into the job. Yeah. In the political media space, at least it's changing a bit every cycle, but it was a pretty small pool of firms that got a very high amount of the races everyone was wanting. So federal campaigns, congressional. The Senate races are really off the table. There's very few media firms that are appointed by the committee that get the Senate races, unless that's a client of yours that you had all the way along, a state rep kind of state legislative client. So identifying the places where somebody like me had access to understanding what was on the table and access to the people that were building the teams. And then, and believing that, not trying to hustle work, you're not going to get is a big learning curve. Because you think, I thought I'm this whole thing, I'm all these women, the Democrats, everyone talks about women, I'm women of different races and different sexual orientations and different geographies. And people care, but it's not enough to tip the scales to get you hired versus a traditional team. So I feel like building this thing for me had to be because I wanted to do it and not because its very existence was going to get us hired, because those are two really different things. And then I got some really great advice from a former client when I was going through early time, like growing pains about getting the work. And she said, just keep talking to people you like to work with. Just keep calling people that you'd like to work with, other consultants, former colleagues, former managers. Because the more you're sort of in the heart of the conversation, the more likely you are to be put on a list to get a pitch, to get in the room. So, for me and my little shop, I pitch 15 races and I get one. So you just have to know what you're in for, which is hard. It's the hardest job out there, I think, being a small hustle. And the space is getting weirder because it's weird, because American politics is weird right now. Right. And voters are confused and everyone's unhappy and everyone's pissy and everything feels make or break, incredibly high stakes to everybody right now. And so you just have to figure out what piece I have had to figure out what piece of the puzzle can I do to make life easier for all these people, all these hirers, whether it's a candidate or a coalition or a group of funders, or you do a lot of these ballot measures. How do I fit into their existing concerns? A lot of this job, like I know how to make commercials and I know how to build message, but you have to really know people, and it starts by knowing who's hiring you, and it moves on to knowing the voters that are going to pass the thing you're hired for. So I think that part of, it's not a if you build it, they will come scenario. It's not how it works. It's like build it because you want to, and then hustle twice as hard as you've ever hustled, and maybe it'll work. That's what that is. That's what this business is like. Those sort of learning curves of business ownership is, you just get a lawyer and a good financial person, and you're like, wow, there's so much paperwork, and it never stops. So that but we're all intelligent women, and we can figure that out. But it is, you have to really want to do what you're doing because it's hard. Yeah.
Nancy, has that been your experience in kind of going out on your own and starting your own firm?
Gosh. So my overhead is really low because I had figured out this way to do polling in a different way that was low cost. And I spent many years figuring out how the best way was to pitch people on this new methodology. So I had kind of got that down and then done a really large volume of work. And had worked with a lot of different people over the years. And, this was right after the 2022 election. And so I'm sure y'all know, like half of your LinkedIn, all of your text messages, everyone you're talking to on Instagram, they're all your campaign teams, right? Yeah. And so you kind of like don't have these are all the people that you're talking to are the people that you can earn trust with and that you're working with day in and day out. And so, part of it was just, I was already communicating so much with these people that it was just so easy to inform people. So that was the first thing I had to tell people. And I don't think, that sounds really simple, but really that was incredibly important because oftentimes people are coming to you and saying, I'm ready to do a poll. And I want to make sure that they're coming to me and not where I used to work. And so, part of it was I was just putting out feelers, communicating this to other folks, making sure people knew, where I was. Started with people that were most likely to be sending me business, the people who had sent me a lot of business in the past, the people that I really enjoyed working with, the people who I had a great working relationship with that made me feel good, and the issues that I really cared about, because it's a really long list of people. So in terms of where do you start, it was, do I enjoy working with these people? Do I feel passionate about that issue? Have they sent me a lot of work before? And so I kind of just made my way through the list, and I don't know that I'll ever be done, but that got me started. And luckily I found that there were so many people who believed in me and wanted to send me things just immediately. And even if something wasn't immediately apparent, there were contacts that I made, and then they're 6 months later, oh yeah, like now we're ready to pull. And so, yeah, just actually telling people was a big first step. And then I think beyond that now, I don't know that I think I've taken a little bit of a different approach. I'm realize that my network is what is, it's not just this other side thing where I'm a pollster and then sometimes I network. And that's how I think I used to think about things, was, this was this other task that I had, but mostly I'm a pollster. Now I realize that is my security, and that is what has provided me with the opportunity to be able to create this life for myself. And so, it's incredibly important for me to continue to build those relationships, and to, even if there's not an immediate ask, just to spend time with people and get to know them and say, hey, like, what are you interested in? Like, what are you working on? How can I be a resource to you? Like, what do we both vibe on? Like, what's the thing that both gets us excited? And like, not even asking, say, will you consider me, but just saying, like, how can I help you? And I know that sounds like a really bizarre way of doing marketing, but I've found that it's, when you offer to help other people and you just are there because you're interested in them, and the relationship that you can have, that it does produce better relationships, and it does produce business.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for talking about your businesses and how you've got your start. I kind of want to pivot a little bit more to election 2024 and kind of where you see where we're going, and some questions about that. So in 2024, of course, Democrats are fighting to reelect President Biden, advance Democratic control in Congress, and flip seats down ballot, as many of the biggest battles have now been moved to be fought in state legislatures. So how is your organization approaching 2024? How does it differ from previous elections? And how has your position as a business owner give you an advantage over maybe some of those more traditional firms, as Kelly alluded to earlier? And I will start with, with you, Nancy.
Sure. So I'm really passionate about down ballot races, and this is really a big focus of my work and a large part of my client portfolio. I spent many years trying to figure out how to better survey these smaller districts in a way that was affordable and accurate. And what I'm really focused on now is being able to provide the level of client of experience and service that these clients really need. Oftentimes, the larger legacy firms are putting people who, they are really concerned about their governor's races or their U.S. Senate races or their frontline districts and so on. So they're putting the people who have the least amount of experience on these races that are the hardest to pull and that most require a lot of experience. So my focus is basically on trying to provide that legacy experience to these races. And I've done now, just in the past 2 cycles, several hundred state surveys, and I have really strong opinions on how you win these races. So in addition to just providing that service experience for these races where information matters the most, where being a specific client and the dynamics of the district and the candidates matter the most. is just having done a lot of reps and having really strong points of view about how things are done. And so to kind of building off of my earlier response on business, I'm spending more time just going to different states where I've spent a lot of time doing state-led work and actually sharing information about, like, this is what we need. I know that we need this, and doesn't have to be polling. It's more about, this is what I've noticed in working on all of these races that will make it easier for us to flip this state legislature. This is what we did in Pennsylvania. This is what we need in Texas now, or this is what we did in Minnesota and Michigan, and this is what we need here now. So taking a little bit more of a proactive approach, and also just marketing myself more towards this specific type of work. And you're right, it is incredibly important. I think a lot of people don't realize how important it is, because it's not one of the things you read about the most on the news, but increasingly all of these decisions are being made in the states. Abortion rights are being decided at the state. Education funding is decided at the state. Much of your tax burden is decided at the state level. So all the things that people most think about when they think about government are actually happening at the state level. And there's just not that many people who are deeply focused on it. And I happen to find it really cool.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Kristal, you know, how is Organized Tennessee kind of approaching 2024 in terms of a voter protection perspective, and how does it maybe differ from previous elections in terms of either lessons learned or what you're doing differently this cycle?
Yeah, well, while we're a nonprofit, we do have a lien, and what we see that's happening in the state, there are a couple things. One, there are conservative groups that are popping up that are really trying to challenge people's access to the ballot. We even see a national movement where people don't want to count ballots after Election Day. I'm not sure if folks have seen that. And I won't say which party is doing that, but I think you can tell. And so what we're doing, we're really working with our state entity. So we work with our C3 table. We work with our donor table, and we're trying our best, as best we can. We're still a small staff, to work with different, not directly with candidates, because we can't do that because of our C3 status, but working with our any C3 coordinated effort. Let me say it like that. So for instance, we work with the League of Women Voters. That's a group that we are always able to be in coalition with, because they believe in voter protection and staffing polls on Election Day. So the way that we see fighting for democracy in 2024 is really continuing to partner with the national groups that we do, but also really rallying state partners around the need to stand up volunteers, to stand up lawyers that can roll into our apparatus to make sure that every single ballot is counted, whether it's an early vote ballot, whether it's an absentee ballot, whether it's a provisional ballot. All of these things are going to be so critical specifically to this election, because we already know that there's an attack on people, just their right to vote. So anything that we can do to alleviate voters' pains at the ballot box, that's what we're trying to do. And that's why we've started already early having these conversations with people across the state. And we're just asking as many people to not only volunteer and to show up for us, but also potential and would-be donors to give, because we need to, the more money that we can raise in support of the election, the more people we can ensure that we can staff across the state, the more support we can have for our boiler room on Election Day. And so we're making those pitches not only to volunteers and paid people across the state, but also to donors or people who are looking for investing in democratic or democracy-related causes.
We seem to have lost our moderator. My guess, she was going to ask you, Alex, how you're seeing your organization's contribution to a 2024 electoral reality.
Yeah, I can go while we wait for her. For us, we've in general heard a lot about people. There's a section of voters who are frustrated with both Trump and Biden, with our current options for president. But we've also seen that over the past like 10-ish years, an increasing interest. Hey, Alyssa.
Sorry, my internet shut off.
We just kept chugging along.
Awesome. Let's go. Keep it rolling.
We've seen increasing interest in local elections, and like people, especially young people, seem to understand that there's a lot of power at the local level. Like the rest of you were talking about, like local elected officials make decisions on things that affect our lives every day, like taxes, policing, reproductive rights, the environment, all these issues that people really care about, and it's like why they're voting. So the way we are most helpful is by showing people information about those local candidates and those local measures. We also know that when people are more informed about the local stuff, they're more likely to vote. It kind of makes common sense. Like, you actually might want to vote if you have decided and are confident in your decision. But that is also backed up by RCTs we've done. So I think just my hope is more people see local information that we're putting out, and then in turn end up voting their whole ballot this year.
It's weird. It's weird that this is not the first time I've heard this idea that a ballot can be driven from the bottom up. I mean, in my entire career, it's always been top down based on budget and exposure, right? If between the hard and soft side of the Biden campaign, they spend $1 billion on voter contact, one would think that would drive people to the polls. But I don't know, Nancy knows better than any of us, but we all are news readers, that people are not excited about their choices. So I think that there is, like, in people that work in voter contact space, whether it's through tools like you, Alex, or through services like you, Kristal, or just like traditional voter contact programs, you're in like two buckets. You're either working with Biden comms or you're working around Biden comms a little bit. And I think it's going to be a really confusing time for practitioners to try to make it less confusing for voters. I also do a lot of stuff down the ballot, but I have a handful of congressional races too. And even the congressional races in red places, because I mostly work in red places, we're trying to figure out how to make some separation between a Biden Washington and what it means to send said person to Congress. I mean, I'm sure we've all saw it in the Times yesterday, but it was sort of like this idea that Trump is our change agent, and it's all bananas. But it does feel like this idea that we're trying to like boil things down for the voters and say, we feel you, we hear you. You're not excited about federal politics, but let's talk about what's happening in your school board races. Let's talk about what's happening on your county council. Let's talk about what's happening in your state legislature, that kind of stuff. And the map for govs is bad it's just like an off year. So it's not even like we're driving state-based conversations from the top. And I mean, I think we're going to do that with a lot more grassroots than we've ever done before. If people are not knocking 3 times as many doors as they did last cycle, they're probably not doing it right. So I don't know, it's a weird time. And I don't think we'll see that. I think we'll see pretty predictable activity from the soft side of federal races, the programs that run soft side dollars. It'll look and feel very similar, which means the rest of all of us need to pivot to be able to sort of like meet the voters where we're seeing more and more they need to be met.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for commenting on 2024 and sharing your thoughts. And sorry for my internet interruption there. I think there's a storm rolling in the DC area. So, but I kind of want to pivot to talk about like future leaders and your advice for any additional women who want or are considering maybe in the future opening their own shops. So, kind of more broadly speaking, when it comes to the industry, and I think some of you have commented on this already, but what role do you think that mentorship plays in supporting other upcoming female entrepreneurs in the political arena? And I'll kind of leave it open for anybody to answer.
I mean, back to Nancy's point, like this work is the bigger your network and the better your brand, your reputation, the more work you get. And it doesn't even mean you get work, but you definitely don't get work if you have a bad reputation. Kind of. I mean, you could be like one of the old school dudes that do this work and they're doing just fine, even though everyone knows that they're unpleasant. So, meh. But I think that the mentorship thing is about taking the network that you've protected and built your whole career and finding somebody who really wants to be part of that network and helping them be the best version of themselves to fit into the space, and then giving them access to people that you have built relationships with, because there is the more you do it, the better you get at it, but you have to be protective on both sides of that. I do a ton of trainings and sort of classroom trainings and bigger group trainings, which I think that is great for anybody that's coming up and just wants to know about the industry. But true mentorships where you find a young woman and you spend a lot of time with them and you are an asset to them, that is like incredibly beneficial and needs to be really treated with the respect because of how important relationship and network is.
Also, for fundraising, I think it's true for donors as well as for investors. This idea, ask for advice, get money. Ask for money, get advice, like that. So for most of the money we've raised by far, the first conversation we're having with investors has been like, what's your advice? And that relationship has turned into a mentor relationship. I also feel like, especially when times are really busy, which they are, every 4 years, every 2 years, getting a warm intro to someone is just the only way you're going to get in. So whether it's a customer, like channel partner or whatever, I think a really impactful way mentors can help is making those warm intros. And, I feel like the most valuable relationships we have came from a warm intro. So, and that those can be like super easy to make if you are a mentor, but like just so valuable down the line.
Yeah, I think mentorship, the idea of it like doesn't mean anything unless you're willing to recommend somebody, because otherwise it's, that's what you really need, is you need someone who's going to vouch for you so you can get business, or who's willing to give you business. There's a million people you could ask for advice, but you really need somebody who's going to say, this is an excellent pollster. Like, we won't work with anybody else. Like, hire her. Like, that's what you really need. People who will bring you in on projects. I will also say that just asking other people for advice, part of my biggest hesitation in starting something of my own was that I really enjoy having people around me. I work with campaigns. I love teams. I like talking to people. And so it was hard for me to get over this idea of just being on my own. But what happened was I grew this community of other people who are also in the same boat as me, either because they were running organizations or businesses or, their own firms. And it was really important for me to ask a lot of people for advice. And that was part of the process of telling people things, was asking them, what have you learned along the way? And that's been really great. And then whenever I hear someone else doing that too, I want to pay it forward and continue to build this community of people who are able to ask each other honest questions, because sometimes you feel stupid. I'm a pollster. Like, I don't have a business degree. And so I want to ask people some questions sometimes, or what have you learned? And that is really helpful. But I think that is a different kind of mentorship than the kind of thing that actually is bringing you in on a project, which I think is most helpful if you really want to make sure that someone succeeds. The people who have really helped me the most are the ones that have been willing to make sure that I got a project.
Right, and go to bat for you. Okay. And then, Kristal, did you want to answer?
I feel like everything that the other three women have said is absolutely spot on. I think for as far as mentoring, when I got ready to start Organized Tennessee, there were women who pushed me into starting it, saying like, you can do this, you should do it. And my biggest hesitation was raising money. And that is always a real challenge, no matter how many years you've been in existence, is people's financial situations change. The thing that helps is that this is a C3, so it's a write-off, which is really, really good. But even just getting the foundation blocks together, there were two specific women in the state who really pushed me and helped me and told me, like, you can make this your own, you can grow this. And that was something that was very instrumental and critical in the first 2 years of lifting this organization. So I'm forever indebted to their belief that I could even do this, and that it wouldn't just be like a little side thing, but a real entity where people are being paid and being given, healthcare insurance. Like, those things were very important to me early on. And the fact that we've been able to do this is just, I'm always just kind of amazed at it. So it was women, though, specifically 2 women who helped push me into this position.
Thank you so much for sharing. So what advice, in addition to kind of hustling and really building your reputation and relying on your network, what kind of practical advice would you give to young women who are aspiring to either make their way in the political arena, to be entrepreneurs, or to be otherwise civic leaders?
I'm happy to start again. I would say, particularly if you're thinking about starting something new, survey the landscape and see where your idea could fit in. I don't believe that we should ever operate from a place of scarcity. So just because someone has an organization that is similar to yours, it doesn't mean that you would do this exact same thing. That was something that really, I would say, hindered me from starting earlier, was that I would be stepping on other people's toes in my state. But once I realized that there's enough room for everyone to eat, there's enough room for everyone to make impact, that was the thing that really drove me forward into creating this. But I think even at the national level, and I'm sure others would probably have something to say around this, really building strong alliances with people who will be bought into your vision. Because the first couple of years, people are bought in because of you, not necessarily because they know that your organization is going to take off or do anything great, but they know who you are. And so really establishing those strong connections, and every interaction is a potential partner or donor or volunteer. If you treat everyone in that manner, then you're always able to reach back and have people to support your effort moving forward.
Right. Anyone else want to?
I think that's such a great point. I was going to say, be nice to people. People, really tell people the truth.
Yeah.
And be nice to people.
Yeah.
Like, everyone should you want people to come away remembering that you did a really great job, but also how they felt when you were working with them on a team. And that will get you so far. People get to choose. There's so many people who will do a great job, but you want somebody who's on your team that you trust and that you enjoy working with, right? Yeah. And so I say, be nice to people. Don't have a couple drinks and talk poorly about other people ever. And when you are on a phone call, like with other people, just add all those people on LinkedIn. I think that was one thing that I wish I had done. I was so bad at just adding people on LinkedIn. Add people on LinkedIn. Just make it part of your habit, so that you can find people later. People change jobs, and you might want to find them later. So yeah, just do that. Find them on LinkedIn, and make a point to follow up with them every once in a while if it's somebody that you felt like was really interesting to you.
Yeah,
I think Nancy's point is really important, and for me mostly because you can't do this work, I think, in any corner that any of us sit in without a version of monetizing your relationships. And to some people that can easily go transactional. And I think some people are fine with that. I think some people are better dealing in transactionality. I think men are better at dealing in than women, but that's just an observation. For me, that was always a really hard thing, to take somebody that I'd gotten close with on a campaign and then sort of figure out how to turn that into work, or be upfront about the fact that, like, I do like you, and I'm going to need you to help me figure out how to get this other work. Right. And partly because of the way I built my business, I also believe that there is that sort of like transactionality where money changes hands doesn't always have to be a dirty thing. Like in other industries, they call it lead like lead fees, you know, or like
generation.
Lead generate, like referral fees, that kind of stuff. And so much in my space is done behind closed doors. Did you know that so-and-so is getting a piece of such and such? And I don't know that any of that is necessarily needs to be part of, you know, this work doesn't have to be so opaque. It can be more translucent, more open access to that information. So part of the importance of being firm in the kind of person you are and trying to be the best person you can be is because corners of this small business ownership in an industry that moves fast with lots and lots of money is it can turn transactional pretty fast, and you just want to be prepared for that.
Yeah.
Just to add on to that, I think when I started, I was like so focused on like closing the next deal, the urgency, like closing as soon as possible. And I underestimated how like actual relationships take time. And the positive of that is like you can get to know someone over time and like build a really great relationship. Like if you're not BFF after meeting at the first happy hour, like it's okay. You may be BFF in 2 years. Like
right.
Happened. And I also, some of those people who I like did small talk with 9 years ago, you know, at the time were like very junior level folks and now are leading things. And I, at the time, kind of forgot that would happen. I wasn't like focused on that because I was like, we need to exist in 3 months. But the power, I think, of like building authentic relationships over time and like trusting that other people will grow in their careers too. So like be nice to junior people too, I guess.
Yes.
Actionable advice.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And then last question before we close our panel today, share a win that you've had as a founder. We'll go around the Zoom room, if you will. One that you are most proud of. So I will start with Kristal. Share a win that you've had, and particularly one that you're most proud of in your organization or in your career.
Wow, I think just being sustainable over the last couple of years, there were several things that I thought we were shut down, particularly around funding. So that's one win. And I think just the national partnerships, that has really stamped our credibility in the state.
Mm-hmm. Great. Kelly?
I feel like I twice in my 2 cycles on my own, I got the feedback that going into a pitch, it wasn't already baked for me. You know, a lot of times it's like they already know who they want, but you go through the pitch process anyway for some silly reason. Anyway, it wasn't like that. And that sort of the feedback was that I won in the room, which is hard to do in my experience, and always nice to have. You basically never get feedback, or you get, we really like you, but we're going in a different direction is basically what is said to me every other day. But when you get you won in the room, that means that I'm doing something right. And to be able to win in a room means regardless of how many races I land or what this firm looks like or what the rest of my career looks like, I've grown to a place where I know what I'm talking about and people believe me.
Awesome. Nancy?
I'm really, I don't want to say like a campaign win. I want to say something else, but they somehow are the first things that pop to my mind. I think maybe the thing I'm most proud of is that in being in control of my work life, I get to make sure everything's aligned in ways that feel right for me. And it's really made me a better friend, a better daughter, a better sister, a better part of my community. And that's what I'm most grateful for. And also just I'm finding I'm working less and sleeping better. Learning that like hustle culture isn't the same as success has been a really valuable lesson for me personally.
It's one I think the whole political industry needs to maybe will eventually learn. And then Alex, we'll close with you. What's one success that you've had as a founder, particularly one that you're most proud of?
Yeah, I think the thing I'm most proud of is recently voluntarily recognize our employees union, which is very,
Awesome.
I love our employees so much. I love our team. They're what makes this fun every day for me. And I feel just very proud of them and us of having that relationship. So that's
awesome. Well, thank you, ladies, so much for joining here today. I really appreciated all the advice and wisdom and just hearing your amazing wins. Wishing you all luck in 2024. And thank you, everyone in the room, for joining us this afternoon. And we'll see y'all later. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.